How is everybody doing tonight? You will see I am guest by our fabulous Cover One writer, Hans Hansen. You know him on the internet as Uber Hansen, but we will be talking about Matt Milano, regardless of whether Aaron actually loaded the linebacker video here. You'll still get to enjoy it.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia Worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL.
Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with my new partner in crime, Mr. Hans Hansen. How we doing, Hans?
It's good. It's a little hot in the room I am, so if I just start sweating mid-show, that's why. It's not because I'm nervous or anything.
Good. That's obviously no one would think that. So we're excited to have you jumping on here with us. For anyone who hasn't had a chance, Hans is one of the actual directors over at the Bills subreddit and does some awesome preview series over there, moderating on their fabulous site, and does a lot of writing for us over at cover1.net, and is fun to be able to have on here with us. So obviously you guys heard me joke at the beginning. Aaron actually does create the video overlay at the beginning when you guys hear the announcer do it. So I just have this picture of Matt Milano. I don't have that on the video that's there. So instead of me learning how to do it, I'll just give him a hard time and make fun of him for it. But tonight you are joining us because we are going to be continuing our linebacker position preview series with the Buffalo Bills linebackers this week. And it's maybe a little bit more interesting than some people think. It's not always the sexiest position to go through because it's not fantasy football related, but it might have the sexiest Buffalo Bill. It's got Matt Milano. He's a damn good looking gentleman. So Hans, as you think about this position group, there's a lot of different stuff that we'll go through tonight, but I will say it's hard not to make the case that this is probably the most downgraded position on the team from a position group standpoint. I can probably make the argument that every other position group that we talk about, it was either equal or better. I guess I'll even say a healthy Josh Allen makes up for whatever you think of Case Keenum to Kyle Allen, and every other group I think is either equal or better. This is probably the one where, not probably, it is the one where we have the most material downgrade, just because the discussion we're going to go through, where I don't even know what my answer is right now of who's going to be the other starter, isn't going to be Tremaine Edmunds. How do you feel about this position group and how much ambiguity there is going into the season with it?
Yeah, I mean, I look at every single other position group there is on this team, and I think that they're crazy deep at all the positions, and they're strong at the starting spot. This position, though, we just don't know, right? Like, we knew Tremaine Edmunds was Pro Bowl caliber player the past few years. Whether or not people loved him or hated him doesn't really matter. He was a very good linebacker, and he got paid by the Bears. And now we have this kind of slew of a bunch of players that can fit, might be good, might be there. Maybe there's a guy out there that's going to be great, but we really don't know. This is the one kind of unknown on this roster for 2023.
So speaking of those names, obviously we'll get into Mr. Matt Milano here in a moment. He'll be our primary topic. Then we'll talk about the guys behind him, whatever order you may have them in. You have Tyrell Dodson, who has now been around the Bills for quite a bit. Now, age 25, will turn 26 during the season. We have special teams ace Tyler Medikevich. We don't really see him as a factor in this competition, I don't believe. Then you have the last two third-round picks, both Terrell Bernard, the 2021 pick, and 2022 pick, this year's third-round pick, Dorian Williams. You have veteran mainstay AJ Klein, who's been on and off the roster for the last couple years, and then a couple guys lower down, Travon Howard, maybe Baylon, Spector, a couple other names floating around like that, where I think that there's a possibility you could hear something there. Travon Howard did play for the Los Angeles Rams and make the interception that sent them to the Super Bowl in their Super Bowl run. Lauren here as the third biggest Matt Milano enthusiast on the show. I appreciate her reading the subtitles on the headlines there. So let's start with, before we get into the competition and whether we think it's a 3-headed or a 5-headed competition or whatever it might be, let's talk with the reason there is for confidence in this group, the reason there is for excitement with the Buffalo Bills linebacker group, and that is all-pro linebacker Matt Milano. Last year, really breaking into the recognition that many of us thought he probably should have had for a little while here, was borderline a Pro Bowl player for a while, but finally got a lot of those kudos all at once last year. And I actually just read, I wish I could credit him. It'll come to me. Someone that I like, that I interact with on Twitter, did their linebacker rankings and had him number 2 behind Fred Warner, which I'm not going to waste energy arguing. I think it's awesome. We're now in a space where people are comfortable talking about, is Matt Milano the best linebacker in football? For anyone who hasn't listened to it, Taylor, that we've had on the show before, that covers the Patriots, was on with Mina Kimes for the AFC East preview, and they made that exact statement that, is Matt Milano the best linebacker in football? And they, kind of kicked that around a little bit. How does that make you feel now, someone you've been a huge supporter of his for a while now, to hear that kind of recognition and respect and that kind of, those flowers being given to a player that has finally kind of reached that status?
Yeah, I won't go too far into how unbelievably attracted to him I am. I'll just talk mainly football with him. But yeah, Matt Milano's been great for years. I mean, he's great at everything he does. You talk about like a 5-tool player in the MLB. Matt Milano's that at the linebacker position. He can blitz the quarterback. He can, guard tight ends and even wide receivers out of the slot. He's a great run stopper. Like, he's just a very good linebacker. There was a couple little hiccups throughout the year, maybe where he missed an open tackle or something along those lines. But for the most part, he was just dominant. And he's been, like I said, very good for years. And for him finally to kind of get the recognition from the entire NFL, even though he was battling through injuries towards the end of the year, like major injuries that were just kind of quietly hidden from the public, he still produced at an insane level. I don't really see him taking a step back this year. It's going to be hard for him to take a step forward because, like you just said, people are talking about him as maybe the best linebacker in football, which you don't get much better than that.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And you reminded me the way you described it. So it was, having Taylor Kyles on with Mina, he described him as, he's like, I don't know, is he a big nickel back? Is he a fast linebacker? Is he just a dangerous blitzer? Is he actually still the safety he was at Boston College? He can do all the things. And I thought it was really well said. It's his versatility that makes him so dangerous. And I think Eric Turner's done some really good video breakdowns that show he's so naturally intuitive and instinctual. Like those things where, oh my gosh, how did he know to be there? How was he in the right place at the right time? Like he's not the most physically gifted linebacker in the league. He's not as tall as Tremaine Edmunds was. He's not as heavy as heck Baylon, Spector, and AJ Klein are. He's probably the second or third fastest linebacker on our roster. Like there's no like one physical gift that you would say, oh, well, he's got that to lean on, and then everything else he kind of goes from there. It really is, a lot of it is his mind, and he's good at all the things. Like, he is pretty fast, he is pretty big, he is tall enough, he is, so he checks a lot of the boxes at being enough. He crosses the threshold for each of them. But a big piece of it is just that preternatural ability to know where that is and how much of that is genuine instincts, where some people just have that kind of innate football IQ, combined with, I do think there is a pretty obsessive film study, to him. Okay. I think that he is very, very much one of those guys who's in there all the time, knowing the tells, knowing the keys, and is, not only putting in the requisite amount of time, but I think is kind of overboard in the amount of preparation that he puts in. And you see that when you see those flash plays. And some of that was what we wanted from Tremaine Edmunds. Those flash plays aren't an accident with Matt Milano. It's because he puts himself in position to make those big explosive plays because he picks on things at the right time and then diagnoses it and is able to then use the physical gifts he has to beat them to the sideline, to, cut underneath the pulling guard and get behind him and then still chase down the line and get there before he gains yards. Those kind of things are where he's special. And I think, we don't notice until you go back and watch on all 22 where you see him carry a slot receiver down the field that cuts off a position that they thought was going to be a big chunk play, and he makes it that it don't even attempt it. But we don't know that until we see later on. So before we talk about maybe how we see it transitioning into the year, anything else you think maybe he deserves credit for that people don't think about as much?
Yeah, I mean, just bringing up one game in particular, if I go back to the Ravens game, right? So going into halftime, the Ravens were marching up and down the field on the Bills. The Bills offense was kind of stuttering for the first half of the game. When they came out in the second half, there was more Matt Milano blitzing, more Matt Milano spying Lamar Jackson. And if there's one guy that's hard to kind of track and follow, it's Lamar Jackson. He's almost impossible to tackle. And Matt Milano's instincts, like you were alluding to, allowed him to kind of keep Lamar bottled up. And people talk, okay, Josh put the offense on his shoulders in that second half, in the rain, blah, 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 all this stuff. If Milano doesn't come out and start playing the game he played that game, the Ravens walk away with that game. It doesn't even get close at the end. There's no Tyler Bass game-winning kick. So Milano has a lot of, I guess, moments like that where he's kind of put the team on his back, but people just don't kind of notice it as much, or maybe give him the flowers you alluded to, because it's not as sexy for a linebacker to do those things. It's more sexy for a quarterback, even though, like I said earlier, anything Matt Milano does tends to be sexy.
Duly noted. So one new accessory that he hasn't had previously is a lovely emerald colored dot on the back of his helmet. So this is a topic that Eric Turner and I have had philosophical debates on, and that the Bills defense has very much been aligned where the Mike linebacker, and again, middle is a relative term because the Bills are a base nickel, so you only have two linebackers on the field, and it's more strong side than weak side. But realistically, the weak side linebacker is there because the strong side per se is Taron Johnson, and Taron Johnson is playing on the other side of that linebacker. So let's not go down that path too much. But it's been that guy. So in the example being when Tremaine Edmunds, he didn't miss many games, but when he did, Tyrell Dodson came in and wore the green dot, even though we knew Matt Milano was going to be on the field all the time. So when that transitions to this year and we get into, we discussed pre-show, Leonard Floyd played some actual off-ball linebacker snaps in LA. And I know Sean McDermott, best friend Dave Aranda, runs 3-3-5 down at Baylor. Is that a thing we want to sprinkle in? A lot of people, and by a lot of people, I mean me, have said that, I don't think Taylor Rapp signed here purely to be a backup and just in case. I think he was sold a package that, like, hey, yes, if something happens to either Hyde or Jordan Poyer, you're the first guy in, but also here's something new we couldn't do when it was Jaquan Johnson. We couldn't do when it was even Dean Marlowe. Like, it wasn't something we were going to do all the time, but we want you to come in and be a third safety in like a dime linebacker type role to come in and play. So there's two new wrinkles that are in there that I think could come into play. We've also added some additional depth along the defensive line that we consistently want to have those guys on the field. So I can tell myself a story where Matt Milano is on the field 100% of the times, and whoever, will get into the winner of this competition in a moment, where maybe the winner of that is a 75 or 80% snap guy and not 100% snap guy. Well, if they know that going in, why have that guy wear the green dot and call the plays? Why don't you have lots of other teams have a safety or a weak side linebacker who's on the field 100% of times, call the plays? I'm curious, how much do you think we'll see them continue to lean into, well, this is how we've done it, this is what makes sense, versus can we see Matt Milano maybe take that role when the vocal role hasn't always been his, I won't say strong suit, but has been something we've seen as much in the past? Where do you fall in that? Do you think that that's something we could see, or yes, it's possible, but you don't expect it?
So It's basically everything you just said's in my notes, by the way, just to kind of throw
Nice.
that out
Excellent.
there.
Awesome.
One thing I'll start out with that you just said is, and I don't know Matt Milano personally. I've never spoken to him, but he does seem pretty quiet and subdued, right? Like we've
Yes.
never really seen him at interviews kind of speak loudly, speak particularly confidently. Not saying he can't do that, but I've never seen him be the rah-rah guy either. Like he doesn't strike me as a guy that's kind of leading the defense. Not saying it in the sense that like he's not picking up the defense
More so by
them.
example than vocally.
Yeah. So that makes me question if the green dot goes on his helmet, because is he the guy that's shouting at everybody like here's the plays, everyone getting their spots? Or do you give it to someone else like a Micah Hyde, like a Jordan Poyer? Like you were saying before, it has to be somebody that's going to basically be on the field 100% of the plays. And I can't see it being a corner, like not going to be Trey White, not going to be Teron Johnson, whoever the CB2 is, not going to be them. So my only three players it can be is Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, and Matt Milano. And I could see it be a safety, but I don't see it being whoever's the replacement for Tremaine Edmunds, because I don't think that replacement is on the field 100% of the time.
That's where my head is exactly at. And I agree. And Eric's right that our history has been there, and not only the history of the position, but the fact that when Edmunds was out, it was Dodson. So, I mean, that we have genuine evidence of what's there. Now, my counter to that has always been, well, that was because it was in the moment. You're not going to undo your entire system for a 1 week fill-in. I don't think that means you can or can't do it. I know it doesn't mean you can or can't do it going into the season. They obviously can change that, but we do have evidence that they will stick to that, if not for some other alternative. So I think that's something to watch. I think it's something I'm going to be looking for when we go to camp and are there in person. I'm literally going to be searching to see who has that dot on their helmet and how they handle that. But let's use that as our transition into who that person may be. So I will start this by, before I even list any names, do you think this is a 3-man competition or a 5-man competition?
I think it's 5-man. I don't think it's 3. I think any of them can win it. I have my favorites, but
sure.
It's going to be interesting to see how McDermott plays this, right? I think that there's a path for AJ Klein to be the guy. I don't think Bills fans want to hear that, but the Bills have trusted Klein. Like they brought him back last year because they needed another guy that they could trust. It could be a Terrell Bernard. The Bills seem to really like him. I think he's something. I don't know what he is. He might just be a special teams player, or he might be their future kind of linebacker 2 type guy. Tyrell Dodson, like you said, is worn the dot. All these guys have a chance. I don't really think any of them are necessarily right now on the outside looking in. If I was going to pick one to say is on the outside looking in, I'd say Dorian Williams, just because of his rookie status. He has so much to learn for the position, but I think it's really a 5-man race, as the guy that's going to be standing next to Matt Milano.
So I agree. I think it's okay to describe it as a 3-man race, because I do think Bernard, Dodson, and Williams have a higher likelihood, but it is more than my, cliched non-zero chance for AJ Klein and even Baylon Spector. Baylon Spector is weirdly like close to the best athlete of the group and the biggest guy. Like if you're looking for someone who's actually the closest to a like physical comp to Tremaine Edmunds, the answer is none. We don't have anyone who's actually the crazy pterodactyl wingspan and the height and speed and everything like that. But the closest is weirdly Baylon Spector. He's the biggest guy and one of the faster guys of the group. I didn't see much of anything, but they did protect him and never expose him to waivers for a reason. He was on the 53-man roster, even though he didn't get very many game day actives. I'm going to tell myself that was for a reason. I think that the safest path is probably Tyrell Dodson ahead of AJ Klein, but those two are in my safe bucket. They are the guys that are there that, hey, if we're really, how about this? If we're really going to lean into, we could see a fair amount of Taylor Rapp snaps, and it really is a 70% job on traditional rundowns and on base defensive type downs, even though our base is with Teron Johnson, but that we know in any obvious passing down, we're actually going to swap to dime and bring in Taylor Rapp, that makes it less impactful to have Tyrell Dodson and AJ Klein on, where they are more limited from a coverage standpoint, but are more stout against the run. So I think that's not the path I prefer, but at least I can see it. If I'm that coaching staff, if I'm Bobby Babbitt Jr., if I'm Sean McDermott or whoever else is helping with the defense, depending on who you talk to, Al Holcomb, whoever it may be, that I can see that. I think they want it to be one of these third round picks. And that's kind of where I go, and I'm weirdly torn because the analytical part of me tells me it's Terrell Bernard, in that I think there are indicators. I think that he was actually better than people realize last year. Like, he actually had more flashes, and part of his game was the instincts and the abilities. And, we talked pre-show about, I don't know how true Brandon Beane's comments were on the podcast he was on, where he kind of talked about that almost that Tremaine Edmunds was a blessing and a curse, that he was so good at the things he was good at that, of course, you wanted him on the field, but it also meant you kind of had to do those things because that's what he was great at. And you don't want him, lined up man for man with I was going to say like a Julian, Edelman kind of guy, but like a Chris Godwin, whoever that, jitterbug, or the other version of Cole Beasley on other teams. You don't want him to do that. So we kind of used him for what he was good at. And now moving away from that, of course, we're not going to have the talent and the size and the wingspan and the zone coverage ability in the middle, but it also means we can do other things to have more matchup capabilities, more blitzing, more, versatility and interchangeability between him and Milano. And I think Terrell Bernard checks a lot of those boxes. It more interchangeable with Milano. And I can't explain it, but my gut keeps telling me that it's Dorian Williams. And I don't know why, but something in me keeps telling me that, like, I kind of think it's going to be Dorian Williams. And I can't put my finger on exactly why, other than the pieces I've watched, the breakdowns we've seen, hearing people talk about him, seeing what they've used, seeing some of the things with his arm length and his abilities that direction. A piece of me thinks it might be Dorian Williams. And so I don't know my answer. And I know that's not helpful for the people listening. They want to say, oh no, who do we think is going to be the guy? I can tell myself a story. I think it's between Dodson, Bernard, and Williams, but I can tell myself a story of all five.
Yeah, I mean, you alluded again to Williams' arm length, and that's something that intrigues me with him, especially because what the Mike has to do in the Bills defense. Like, he has to be able to drop back into that zone and take up space. And that's why Tremaine Edmunds was so good for the Bills, but maybe we didn't see it. It's not necessarily we saw him tipping balls, but he was taking up space. Dorian Williams, he's nowhere close to what Tremaine Edmunds was, even size-wise or athleticism-wise, but just throwing out his arm length quick, 33 3/4. Yeah. Tremaine Edmunds, 34 1/2. So you're, 3/4 inch away. And then you look at Terrell Bernard, 30 1/4. So it's a massive difference between Bernard and Dorian. I wonder if it's too much to ask for Dorian Williams to come into this defense in this caliber of team in this year in particular, and he's going to take over Tremaine Edmunds' spot. It was different back in 2018 when Tremaine came in. Like, throw him to the wolves. What's the worst that could happen? We go 6-10 with this team. They weren't planning on making the playoffs. Now it's, we want to make the playoffs and we want to move forward in the playoffs. I don't know if they'll trust Dorian to do that. If they do, wonderful. I'll ride with him until I see a reason not to ride with him. But I'm going to lean Terrell Bernard. I think that there's a plan there, and they like his leadership was something they always talked about with him out of college. Like, he's a great leader. He's a great leader on the field and off the field. I think that the Bills are kind of slowly grooming him to be that guy. And I think my biggest concern with him is his size. You even see him in training camp videos. He looks really slender, slender. But there's a reason they brought in Poona Ford. And now you have Poona Ford and Daquan Jones to protect your smaller linebackers. I think the Bills might have a plan here. And then add to that Taylor Rapp. They can go small in that part of the field because they're so big up front now.
So a couple questions here, and they kind of go together. So Pops Mafia saying, I thought Dodson looked good when Edmunds was hurt last year. Rick here saying, which linebacker is the best coverage guy to replace Tremaine? So Pops, unfortunately, the answer to that is not Dodson. That's the reason. So that many of the things that you saw is that Tyrell Dodson is stout against the run. He is a big physical player that comes up, fills his gaps, takes on blockers, makes stout hits at the line. And if he had just been born 15, 20 years earlier, I actually think Tyrell Dodson would be a much bigger player in the NFL. If it was the former, like, oh, you just brought in those coverage linebackers in 3rd and 12, but every other time you wanted that, like, stout, run stuffing linebacker, I think he would have had a much more prestigious career. Unfortunately, he's not the quickest short area guy. So a lot of that short area movement, pre-snap motion, all the things that so many NFL offenses have turned into is just not his best skill set. So there's a reason they trusted him. He was the guy that came in from Tremaine Edmunds. And no matter what of who Hans and I think is going to be the guy who gets the job, I will guarantee you that Dodson gets the first snap when they start training camp. Dodson will be the guy who gets the first opportunity and lines up first there, just because I think he's kind of the leader in the clubhouse, and that's how this coaching staff handles things. So I think a piece of that gives him a leg up. I think that the athleticism and a couple other things you talked about with Dorian Williams with the arm length, also he has good speed, like ran a 4.49, which is pretty good for a linebacker, but he had exceptional 10-yard split. His short area burst and explosiveness was really good. So I think that there's some opportunity there that he can, with the arm length, he can play bigger than his 6'1" frame is, and has that burst and that short explosiveness, which lets you kind of reach out and break on a ball. If we see him put those skills to use, the highlight reel for him is filled with those kind of things, of him exploding through plays, reacting quickly. If we see him be able to translate that, like I said, there's a piece of me, I can't really put my finger on why, because I think there's a lot more evidence to say that it'll be Dodson or Bernard, but there's a piece of me that does think there's maybe a little bit of a Christian Benford story here, where he comes in and, Benford did that not because he was this otherworldly talent. Some of it was the level of competition. And there's a piece of me that I think connects that with Williams here, that he doesn't have to be an all-pro. He just needs to be better than those other 4 guys. And I think that there's a path where ultimately I think we've thrown enough pieces here that I think someone's going to step up. But I also think no matter who steps up, I think they're going to be the 11th starter out of an 11-man group, which isn't a bad thing when you're surrounded by that much talent, but is, I think, an honest assessment of where we're at with this linebacker group here, is that there's the most unknown. And at least starting out, like you opened up early on, maybe we do have a diamond in the rough that really explodes with this opportunity. The initial assessment is probably this is going to be the least of our starters on the defense.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people have like kind of questioned the plan here, right? Like Terrell Bernard last year, why did the Bills draft a guy that's just Milano's backup? Dorian Williams this year, why did they draft a guy who kind of is a comp to Bernard, like similar athletic profiles? Yeah. And my thought process behind it is like the Bills aren't just throwing away these draft picks. Like there's a plan here, and maybe we can't see it right now, but it could be this like kind of interchange at the linebacker position. Like you have 2 guys that can go play this, do the same things at all the different levels, instead of just having the atypical or the typical Mike linebacker. Like AJ Klein, he's a 2-down linebacker. He's there to stuff the run. That's all he's going to do. Where these other guys, Bernard, Williams, even Spector, have kind of shown the ability to go do other things and do things similar to Matt Milano, where they fit better behind Milano. But maybe there's something in this defense where the Bills are like, hey, we've got something unique here. Let's try it out this year and see if we can't trick people into kind of falling for this lack of a true Mike.
Well, and I think if you're telling your story about, okay, how am I going to replace this freak that we had in Tremaine Edmunds, who was, 6'5", 260, ran a 4.49, had a wingspan like a pterodactyl, and took away the hash to hash middle of the field. The answer probably wasn't, oh, let's find another one of that guy, because there aren't that many humans walking the earth that are like that guy. So if you're telling yourself a story of, okay, how is this going to work out? It's that, okay, well, we're going to ask a guy to simply do his job while being surrounded by Matt Milano, Taron Johnson, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Kyer Elam, Tre'Davious White. Like, that's not a bad spot to be in to be successful with that surrounding you. In front of you, you're always going to have one of Poona Ford and Daquan Jones, or both of them, and run, goal line situations. Ed Oliver, Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle. You're always going to have, really good run defending ends like Greg Rousseau and Shaq Lawson, or bendy edge rushers like Leonard Floyd or Von Miller. Not to mention if we get anything from AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham, people like that. It's not a bad position to be in. So let's throw multiple darts at the board of instinctual, athletic, versatile, interchangeable pieces. And in doing that, you want to know who else is of similar size and athleticism as Terrell Bernard was when they picked Dorian Williams this year? Taylor Rapp is too. He's about the same size, about the same athleticism, played plenty of dime linebacker snaps for the Rams. They invited back Tyrell Dodson. We have bigger guys like Spector and Klein, but I think that it's going to be one of those 6'1", 228-pound gentlemen that are floating out there. And that I think that combination is what they're looking for, is a guy where they're not moving Matt Milano to middle linebacker. That's not what they're doing. They're not taking away what Milano was good at, but let's be able to use him everywhere. And that last year there were spots we didn't use him because we had Edmunds and he was so good at his job. Hey, we only want Edmunds to do that job because he's really good at it. Well, now, hey, we can move guys around. I don't need to know that, hey, is Micah Hyde a little bit better as the center fielder and is Jordan Poyer a little bit better as the box guy? Well, of course, that's probably what they're best suited for. But are both of them so good at both jobs that it's really dangerous for the defense or the offense not to know where they're at? Yes, that's why they have such value in the versatility. Maybe a little bit of that here in the linebacker group, where, of course, we're not taking away what Milano is good at, but now maybe we can use a little bit more disguise, a little more smoke and mirrors, a little more bait and switch that you're not sure who's doing what, that can help, again, put together a package here where we can make that guy work. We can also supplement it, that in short yardage situations, maybe it is a Dodson or a Klein or a Spector. When it's obvious passing downs, maybe it just is Rapp, and that we just need that guy for the middle 60% of snaps to be able to do that job. So I think there's a world where we can do that. And if it comes in and Bernard or Williams, I think they're the two that would answer this question. I don't know that I see a world where Spector or Klein or Dodson run with this and become a hidden all-pro, because I think we've seen enough of them there, or know the limits of the other. There's a chance we don't know what we have with Williams or Bernard. Maybe they just take that job and say, hey, no, we don't need to take them off the field for these guys on short yardage. We don't need to take them off the field in coverage, and they run with it. But we have the bowling bumpers on the lanes just in case, that we can protect them if it comes that way.
Yeah, and I wanted to go back to one thing you said there. You keep bringing up Taylor Rapp, and I couldn't agree with you more on the whole Taylor Rapp situation, bringing him to Buffalo. So when I first saw that signing, I questioned it, not because I wasn't happy with it. I loved that they brought Taylor Rapp. I just didn't understand why Taylor Rapp came to Buffalo. He's a 4-year starter out of LA. He's 25 years old. How could he not? There's another team in the NFL he could go to, and he could be the starting safety on them. So what did the Bills say in that contract negotiation where they said, you want to come here? There's a reason you want to come here. There's no way you're sitting behind Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde this entire year. You're going to be a backup. I don't believe that.
Yeah,
that's what
there's no way that conversation was, hey, come on in, and if something happens to Jordan and Micah, you get to play. Yeah. There's no way that was the end of the sentence.
I cannot believe that. So I have to believe that he's going to be a big part as a dime piece. Maybe the Bills go dime 15, 20%, which would be absurd. That'd be a big number. But I could see him being a huge part of that. And I could see him being kind of the future plan. Like this, we want you to come here for a year, see how it is this year. We'll get you on the field, and then next year you're going to kind of move into maybe a starting role in that deep safety role. Maybe you take over for a Poyer or Hyde. I'm not saying I want that to happen, but there's something more here than just we signed a backup safety. He's not a backup safety.
Yeah, and I think your estimates are right where my mind is at. It's similar to the idea of, oh, we're going to see a lot more 12 personnel, and people envision the 49ers or the Browns where it's like literally like 60%. Like, no, but we ran the least in the NFL last year. So running any is a huge improvement. If we just go from, usually my example is with 12, if we go from the 4.8% to just 25%, which is average, it will seem like a huge shift. It's the same thing with dime. We're not going to become a base dime defense. We're still going to be base nickel. We're going to run more nickel than anything else. But last year, we had a handful of games that were literally 100% nickel defense, where we had 5 DBs on the field, even in goal line, every single snap of the game. And we ran it 90. I don't know if it was a full 95%, but it was over 90% of the number of total defensive snaps that were there. So if we just go to where, hey, most teams use a little more versatility that's there. Some of it was our preference. Some of it is the coaches knew that's what we were best at. That's the system that they think is the most valuable, which I agree. It is the most valuable because the NFL is a base 11 offense. So you match that with base nickel, and we have talent to do it. You match it. However, part of it was personnel driven. We realized when we tried to do versatile things, Jaquan Johnson showed limits. We couldn't do it. We didn't have another one tech to be able to do 3-man fronts or odd man fronts. We only had Daquan Jones, and we were already using him more snaps than we wanted to. We didn't have a third linebacker to bring in base situations that was versatile, who could drop into more coverage outside of what was there. So now having, Terrell Bernard in his second year, adding Dorian Williams, adding Taylor Rapp, adding Poona Ford and Daquan Jones, you now have more options to play with. So whether that goes from, and I don't know, I know the 12 personnel numbers better off the top of my head, so I don't know what the average use of dime was. But I think your reference of, hey, whether that jumps to 10, 15, 20, those are the ranges I'm thinking, that if we all of a sudden run that, hey, we're not going to take Taron Johnson off the field, but we might take that other linebacker off the field and bring in Taylor Rapp because you're not losing much. That's not a big change. And that's simply 20% of the time. We're still going to have the linebacker on there 80% of the time. That's still a ton of base setups, but it protects that linebacker, that we know what Taylor Rapp can do in those situations where he's still a really stout run defender, a really good blitzer, great in the box. But obviously, there are limitations. He's not a Micah Hyde in coverage, but when you compare him to other coverage linebackers, he's good. Like he's a safety. He's good at covering. I think it gives you some versatility to play there. So I think your head's in the exact right place. And those are the exact same numbers I have in my head of the range of possibilities between 10 and 20%.
Yeah. And just another piece to this puzzle, I think, and this might be a little bit controversial, but I don't think the Bills care if you try to beat them with the run. I think that's a thing they don't care about anymore, because maybe they lose 2 games throughout the year because a team runs all over them. The Bills care about the playoffs at this point in time. And in the playoffs, you typically don't win if you're trying to beat a team running on the ground. So if the Bills essentially I'm not saying they're going to go base dime. That would be absolutely absurd. We've never seen that in the NFL. But if they did, it just signify, hey, yeah, you can you just run on us, but you have to outscore our offense, and you probably aren't going to have enough time to do that. Like you go to the Packers game, right? That was one of the weirdest kind of offensive game plans I've ever seen by Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur, what Packers coach?
Matt, Mike is now with the Jets,
Yeah.
Or was
where the Bills were up by 3 scores, and he's just like, all right, we're just going to keep running. It was like, you're running the clock down. You're ending the game for yourself. You're beating yourself. I could see the Bills essentially saying, yeah, okay, run on us. We're in dime. You can run all day, but you're never going to catch us because we have Josh, we have Diggs, everyone else on the other side of the ball.
Which admittedly is how that game finished, where it felt weird. It felt like they physically dominated it, and we won by double digits and never were even remotely they weren't within a score the entire second half.
Yep.
But it felt weird when they were doing it. I do think the Bills have intentionally built a light, fast dynamic pass defense for today's NFL and take the approach where, analytics tells you every handoff is a gift. If you want to hand the ball off, there is just a lower likelihood of a positive outcome, and that we bet eventually you'll have a negative play or a penalty or put yourself in a 3rd and long situation, and then you won't be able to get out of it, and we'll get the ball back, and we'll take our chances, Josh Allen, to do something good with the ball, and you can't stop that. And that if those things happen enough times, we're going to pull ahead, and you're not going to be able to catch up. And obviously, that's how we had the highest point differential in the league. That's how we, won the games that we won. And of course, people will point to, yeah, but the Bengals punched us in the mouth in the playoffs. Yes, but give me back Daquan Jones and Von Miller and Micah Hyde and give me another shot at that game. I'll take it. Give me another one if something did or didn't happen with Josh Allen and the other things around the team at that time. I'll take another shot there. I'm not just assuming that, oh, yeah, we're just going to get punched in the mouth and beat by the Bengals every time we play them. I don't think that's real. I don't think that's the case. Just like it wasn't the case where they were just going to beat the Chiefs and the Chiefs then beat them and moved on to the Super Bowl, because that's just not how it works every single time. So I want to take that approach, and I think it's a smart approach. I like it that we brought in Poona Ford and Daquan Jones. I like it that we have a little bit more versatility there. I like it that we went with a Taylor Rapp third safety versus, say, you could have made an argument for a John Johnson type third safety, and that, like, hey, maybe that I like that they went more like, hey, is he a dime linebacker or a safety? I like that that's more of the discussion. I think that's smart, but pass defense is what matters in the NFL, because pass offense is what matters in the NFL.
Yeah, and the speed, I think the speed's also important, like, can help stop the run as well. You have Poona Ford and Daquan Jones in the middle, and then meanwhile Ed Oliver, I know, again, he's another polarizing figure with Bills fans, but when he has those true one techs next to them, he's shown that he can excel. So now you have an issue in the middle if you're trying to run on the Bills. So what do? You bounce it to the outside where the Bills' fast linebackers exist, and they have generally good tackling corners can come up and make a play. They've kind of built a fairly good defense to stop the run and a great defense to stop the pass.
Yeah. So Whittle here, who I know jumps in spaces a lot and is a big supporter, cover one. We appreciate Whittle. He's saying here, going smaller at linebacker worries me when it comes to the missed tackle percentage. ND, we need to stop the run in the playoffs at some level to advance. So you're right. We can't let a team do that. I will say no team has ran the ball to a championship in 15 years. Like, that's just not how it works. That hasn't happened. No team has run their way to a championship in a long, long time. And two, I don't, size and weight are not indicators of good tackling. I'll give you some examples. Last year, Tyrell Dodson and AJ Klein had double the missed tackle percentage as Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano. So those guys are 15, 20, 30 pounds heavier. They had twice as bad of a missed tackle percentage as guys lighter than them, because so Dorian Williams is a very sound tackler. Taylor Rapp is a very sound tackler. I think they're better and more consistently sound tacklers than some of those bigger guys, because they have some short area quickness, not to get juked and grab at the last minute where you're having, poor grip around them because you're not getting a sound fill as you're hitting them. So don't get me wrong. I get the logic. Ray Lewis is a monster and lit people up. That's not as often anymore. Some of the best linebackers, guys like Shaq Leonard, guys like Fred Warner, guys like Roquan Smith. Roquan's a little bit bigger. Most of the best linebackers in the NFL aren't that big anymore. Tremaine Edmunds was the exception by far. Most of the best tacklers are 225 to 235. It's just what the NFL is like now.
Yeah.
I'm not
concerned
the rest.
about
The logic is there, but the size isn't the reason.
Yeah.
All right. So we've now kind of worked our way back around. Let's at least put our flag onto a guy here. If you, before heading into camp, if you had to place a bet on who is going to be, I'll even give us a little wiggle room. Who is going to be the starting linebacker, sans injury, coming out of the bye in the stretch down the season, heading into the playoffs, not because of injury fill-in, not because but it's not just the default of, Dodson or Klein's going to start week 1 because they're going to lean into that and then see where it goes. And it's a Ramon Humber, Matt Milano situation. Enough of the season has played out. The best guy is out there. It's not injury related. Who do you think is starting down the stretch and into the playoffs opposite Matt Milano?
I think it's Terrell Bernard. I like you said, you have like an instinct telling you Dorian. My instinct's shouting Bernard. I don't know why. And again, he looked really, really skinny at camp, which does concern me. But who knows? He might show up at true training camp this summer, and just thickened up. Maybe he puts on 15 pounds. We don't know. These guys are crazy with their bodies. But there's something with Bernard, and we had that green dot conversation. And while I agree, I don't think that this guy, whoever wins this job, is on the field 100% of the time. Bernard's a guy that the Bills have spoken so highly of with his, like I said, leadership, that maybe he's their green dot guy. I don't know. Something with Bernard sticking out to me.
And I will say it's not nothing, but when a guy who is as trusted as Dave Aranda is in Sean McDermott's ear tells him this is a leader, this is a guy you can trust, that carries weight with Sean McDermott. I already gave away my answer. Whittle is mentioning the same thing here. I do think it's Dorian Williams, and I don't have a ton to back that up. I do think the wingspan, I think there's some, not Matt Milano, but there was some of that instinctual, kind of preternatural ability that, like, he just seemed to know where the play was going to be and was flowing there consistently and putting himself into a good position. I think that the Bills want it to be one of those 3rd round picks. I do think, I feel very strongly that the first snap of training camp is Tyrell Dodson. Yep. And I don't think it's crazy that the first game could even be Tyrell Dodson. I don't think that's crazy. I do think down the stretch that it's going to be one of those two guys. An awful lot of evidence points to Terrell Bernard. I think that's the safer bet. I think that's the guy that makes more sense, but a piece of me still thinks it's going to be Dorian Williams, and we'll see where it goes. I think this is by far the most open, genuine competition of what's there. People talk about, I think there's a chance Osiris Torrance beats out Ryan Bates, but I think it's going to be Bates starting out pretty comfortably. I think there's other spots people talk about. Can Brandon Shell beat out Spencer Brown? Is there, who's going to get the most snaps at slot receiver? I feel pretty comfortable. I can peg 21 out of 22 spots on this team pretty comfortably. I have no idea who the line, like, I don't know that it's just flipping a coin, but anybody can make a pretty darn good argument here who this linebacker is going to be, and I'll listen to it because I think there's a good case to be made for a handful of guys.
Yeah, and I also, my dark horse, I'm just going to throw this out there too, is Baylon Spector. Like you said, there's a reason they kept him like hidden all year. They weren't letting him go to waivers, and I can't imagine they did that for a whole year if they didn't see something there. Unless he completely stinks it up in training camp, I question if they're going to be willing to cut a guy they kind of feel like they've invested in. And Spector kind of did show a little bit when they brought him in. I think it was against the Steelers. That was one of the only games he played in, but I saw something there, and I saw the instincts, and I see the athleticism. Like, he posted a 9.13 RAS, which is freakishly good, but there's also a reason he was a 7th round pick. So we really kind of don't, I don't know what to think about Baylon Spector, but something also is there. There's a reason the Bills have kind of kept him around. I'm not sure what it is right now.
Yeah. So, and I meant it genuinely. I talked about this in the tight end show. There's not really a path where a Zach Davidson or a Nick Gugamos or whoever else gets signed here. None of those guys have a realistic path here. And I'll say, I don't know that Traven Howard has a realistic path. I don't honestly think Tyler Medikevich has a realistic path. I think Tyler Medikevich is a linebacker as much as Tywan Jones was a running back. Like, I think that just is what he is. But at those 5 guys, I can tell myself a story of where any of the 5 of them make sense. I think it's most likely AJ Klein is our Duke Johnson of that group. I think they want a veteran in that room. but they wouldn't mind him being on the practice squad while they did it. And he gets to hang out every day. He goes to practice every day. He's with him in the room every day. And he's kind of our break glass in case of emergency. We didn't really need Duke other than like 2 games I think he got called up for. I think that Klein will be the same thing and that they'll be there. But that brings us to our last topic here. How many linebackers do you think we keep on this roster? And so my mind tells me, hey, we have too much talent at other spots. There's too many running backs and there's too many offensive linemen and defensive linemen and DBs. We need those extra spots other places. But if we don't know who the starter is, does that mean you need extra guys as a possibility? Where do you fall, whether they keep 5 linebackers or 6?
Yeah, I think we talked about this in the Cover One chat. I think it was me and you kind of going back and forth in the Cover One chat a while ago, talking about the Klein situation, the break glass. I think unless he straight out wins the job, unless he out of camp, they're like, he's by far the best option we have, he's practice squad. Even if he's the second best option, they'll put him on the practice squad because they know they can put him there and they can get him back. Like, he's not going anywhere else. So saying that, and Tyler Matakevich is not a linebacker to me. He's a special teams player. But I guess I'll count him for the sake of how many linebackers I say.
He should count in this analysis of whether I mean 5 or 6. Yeah.
I go 6, and it's kind of what you said before. If they don't truly know who the guy is, I don't know if they want to expose one of these guys that's going to get, sucked up by somebody else. Like the only one they can really cut at this point is Baylon Spector. And will he go somewhere else? I think he's a guy that people might have interest in, but then again, we say that every year with these guys that go through waivers or practice squads, and it never turns out a ton of them leave. But I'll still go with 6 guys, with Klein being the practice squad linebacker.
I do. So one, I agree fully in our discussion that you referenced before that it's either Klein outright wins the position, and by wins the position, it will be disappointing, and it won't be because he was the best guy. It will because he's the least bad guy, and the other guys didn't earn their trust. And they're like, hey, at least we know what we're getting with AJ. We can trust him to be in his job, and I guess we'll play more Taylor Rapp snaps than we thought. So it won't be a great story if AJ Klein is there. So everyone should be rooting for AJ Klein to be the veteran on the practice squad, but in that room with those guys as a break glass in case of emergency, Duke Johnson type linebacker. So I think he's out. I don't think there's a realistic path for Trayvon Howard, but God bless him. He made a big time play to send a team to a Super Bowl. That's worth a shot in the dark. So God bless him for being there. We'll see what that happens. Tyler Matakevich counts, so we'll count that. Obviously, from a roster standpoint, Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams, Tyrell Dodson are locks. Tyrell Dodson is a guaranteed contract. We're paying him $2 million whether he plays linebacker or doesn't play linebacker. He's getting $2 million from the Bills. So he's a 99% lock. OJ Howard was like that last year. We did eat the money and cut OJ Howard. So it's not $2 million is not enough that if Tyrell Dodson just simply isn't good enough, or if Baylon Spector outright beats out Tyrell Dodson, it's possible, but I think those 4 are locks. So it's a matter of 5 or 6, and it's a matter of there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of value at other spots. That 52nd and 53rd spot is super valuable on this roster, and somebody really good is not going to make the team. I think there's enough question that I do think it's 6. I think it's Klein going to the practice squad, and both Spector and Dodson make it, but I won't be shocked. Like, this will be the one that I'm debating when I'm trying to keep a 10th defensive lineman, when I'm trying to keep a 10th offensive lineman, make sure that Quentin Morris makes it at tight end, whatever it is. If you want a Jamarcus Ingram or a Zane Anderson or a Cam Lewis, it's going to be because you need to cut Tyrell Dodson or Baylon Spector. So I think you're right, but that's going to be that last debated spot when you're making your 53-man rosters. Is this position? Is he better than those other people at their position, or is he more valuable because of the uncertainty ahead of him? That's going to be a interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and I won't go into the whole entire 53-man roster, but I do think there's a battle. I think there's probably like 5 guys for the final 3 spots or so.
Yeah.
You're talking about a Quinton Morris, you're talking about Alex Austin, who they just drafted, Latavius Murray. Maybe do the Bills keep 4 running backs? They keep 3. Boogie Basham, do they keep him as a defensive end when eventually Von Miller's going to come back? Then you have a little too many. So I think that's a spot where probably a Baylon Spector, he's fighting those guys, not necessarily in his position group. He's fighting other positions to find a spot on the roster.
Yeah, those names I threw out of safety, Zane Anderson, Cam Lewis, they're going to be fighting for those special team spots as well, of who can be able to cover those spots. So awesome chat here tonight. Just Dukes Manukas. Manukas. I won't try to butcher the name there. We appreciate it. Drafted Williams, can't be confident Bernard. That's not crazy, but I would be careful with that. That would be like saying, well, they drafted Justin Shorter, so they can't be happy with Khalil Shakir. Like that's not a 1-to-1. That's not always the case of where that is. Sometimes the guy's just the best guy on the board. And I do think they wanted another competitor in this room. So you could also read that they can't be confident in Dodson, so they drafted Williams. They can't be confident in Klein. They wanted another competitor in this room to help replace Edmunds. So I don't hate that. A 100th overall pick still matters. It's a valuable pick. But I think it's okay to take a dart throw. And if one of those turns out to be a starting linebacker, I will consider the use of both of them. If you asked, hey, would you trade 2 late 3rd round picks for a starting linebacker? The answer would be yes. So I don't care which one it is, as long as one of them ends up being a starting caliber player. I don't care that it took them 2 shots at it to figure it out, because the other one will play special teams and be a contributor and be depth. Like, that's okay. I'm all right with it that route. But overall, our fantastic producer, Chris Kepner, was here pulling up your comments all along. Hans, thank you for jumping in. What's the next thing you have coming written-wise?
Yeah, I'm working actually with Chris Janke a little bit on a practice squad, like best crap practice squad, how the Bills have historically balanced it out. It's going to take a bit to write. Chris has done a ton of research. He's also has always been great years past for me when it comes to how the Bills typically do roster building. He has all the numbers. So I'm hoping to get that out in the next couple weeks here, but that's going to be kind of a behemoth of an article. That's my next though.
Awesome. Really appreciate that. Great shout out for Chris. Chris is a huge supporter of Cover One, a great follow. If you're looking for somebody on Twitter, he's a good follow as well. And I agree, really sharp when it comes to the roster construction side of things. A good follow on Twitter. Overall, obviously a lot of good stuff going on. You guys hear that Aaron isn't here. He and I have a crazy schedule this summer between the two of our travel. So we're both out of town. So we're trying to keep things as consistent as we can, trying to get you at least one show a week, if not this one and the Greg Tompsett Sports Show. This week we will have 2. So you have Hans and I here tonight. On Friday night, I'm going to have some special guests. We're going to have Arif Hassan is going to be jumping on with us, Bruce Nolan, and also Elf Ortega, who is some people's favorite Miami Dolphins antagonist, to be able to poke at back and forth. We're going to be having some fun outside of just the Bills with an NFL what if draft, where we're going to be able to have some fun going through, what if Bo Jackson's hip didn't get dislocated? What if Mo Lewis didn't light up Drew Bledsoe? What if it didn't go wide right? Having some different conversations about famous moments, famous what ifs, and we're going to do those in a draft style, presenting those. Should be a really fun discussion. Some guys that I really enjoy talking with are going to be jumping on with us Friday night. So make sure you come check that out. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then we'll be wrapping up our position preview series leading right into training camp. We still have the DBs to go. We also have the offensive line group, which we specifically deferred. We are going to have offensive line guru Brandon Thorne jumping on with Aaron and I to be able to go through the Buffalo Bills offensive line and be able to talk about what we can expect from Connor McGovern, what we can expect from the competition between Bates and Osiris Torrance, what we can expect that maybe now Dawson Knox is a little more available to help out chipping guys next to Spencer Brown, what that will equate to from a protection group and an offensive line group here. So appreciate you guys checking us out. Hans, appreciate your time here tonight, jumping in for Aaron, and Chris is our producer. But on behalf of Chris and Hans, I am Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are